Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Unbiased Truth with your host Branson, and I'm here to talk about the ongoing MAGA Civil War, which has seemingly erupted over the last week or two, and it just seems to be continuing with no end in sight for the most part, as it has exacerbated previous divisions that are already abundantly clear within the coalition that Trump has built since the election, that which compromised MAGA. And we have the further rising power of Nick Fuentes' Graper movement, and which has seemingly continued to involve younger people such as Gen X and Gen Z into the Republican and MAGA fold. Has continued to introduce them to politics, and they're all just kind of fed up with the system at this point, and they have not much to look forward to in a lot of instances. And with that, they're continuing to get involved, and they're seeing a lot of hypocrisy on the Republican side and everything, and a lot of things that's not aligning with their policy. You know, that, and also the way that the administration has handled the Epstein affair and scandal, and other certain politicians and players such as Marjorie Taylor Greene. Trump's not been happy with her. He's kind of denounced her almost, which he does when anyone goes against his way, such as, with Thomas Massey, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was always a former longtime ally of Trump since like almost day one. She, after she spoke with the Epstein victims, whether, you believe in how the level to which Trump was involved or not, she spoke to the Epstein victims, and she wanted to have their stories heard, right away and stuff like that. And she wanted to expose the whole situation. And Trump was very flip-floppy as he's been. He was first, that was one of his major things during the election, saying, "Oh, we got to get that out." And he's pushing for it, because it's part of the deep state. We got to flush that out, wash them all down the drain. And then he gets elected, and he tries to almost bury it, which is a really weird change of pace. A lot of his own voters and coalition were turned off by that, by saying, "Oh yeah, it was just a Democratic scam, it's a collusion run by the Democrats." And granted, some things, such as the Russia hoax, to a large extent was a Democratic hoax, them trying to frame that there was meetings between Trump, and his family, and Putin's, dictatorship administration over there and stuff, and all that sort of interesting information. But there was no collusion for the most part, and then them withholding the Biden Russia laptop story, that definitely influenced the election. So he was right to a certain degree, but that doesn't mean you could just label everything as just a hoax that you disagree with. But like, "Oh, that's a hoax, and like he can get away with a lot of stuff knowing that he's Trump. But that was one major thing he campaigned on. So everyone smelled the hypocrisy in the water. And that's where I feel the whole train of MAGA, even though the concept is still there, the train started to slow down a bit, and people started questioning it. And there was other stuff that came out. But, the way the Epstein affair has been handled has been pretty disastrous for the administration, including, Marjorie Taylor Greene, came out and she was saying, Trump's got to get this out. And then Trump just denounced her, and then he kind of went back, and then he's like, "Oh, he's just been flip-flopping so much. It's really sown a lot of confusion in the air." And now he says he wants to release it, my opinion for it is that, they're both involved in it for sure, Democrats and Republicans and a lot of world leaders. Like, this thing goes probably very down deep in the drain. And there was also, I think, a Washington Post article that said that, Epstein was a double agent. Or he at least worked for Mossad, the Israel's intelligence agency. And I've already heard that from a long time ago. I didn't really believe it, but I already started to suspect after all this, that now we found out that the former Prime Minister of Israel visited Jeffrey Epstein's island, not only in a flight log, but he was actually there. And that there was one of the Epstein victims said that she was, she got inappropriately touched and stuff like that. Inappropriately touched by the Israeli PM. Forgot his name. But, all that there's definitely a strong link. And I already suspected that. But now they're saying, he was also at ties with the CIA. So, he's a double agent for Mossad and the CIA. So, you almost can't get even crazier than that, but it seems like a lot of it's lining up, and that further explains why Israel has so much ties and so much weight over the American politics and so much influence, because they're just holding this over our heads, and they're like, how much do you want us to expose you right now? That, and also the tons of billions of APAC money that is being funneled into, our politics. Both sides are paid with APAC money. They're all, money's infested in the whole system, which is wild. With the super PACs, Citizens United, with all the corporations buying our politicians. Now we have foreign agents, our own allies that are like, trying to influence everything, because everyone's trying to influence what goes on in the U.S., because the U.S., for at least for now, for the time being, runs the world. So, the Saudis, all the Middle Eastern countries, including Israel, all trying to influence us. The Chinese as well, the Russians. It's a whole great game going on. But yeah, there's been a lot of disagreement for MAGA on the Epstein case. I think Trump probably wasn't involved in it, but he was there, and there's enough correlation that the Democrats are going to use that against him and stuff like that. But he just handled this so disastrously that it did not really, it doesn't really look good on him, to be honest, if I'm being honest. But that, and you're also having, other people such as the Glory person Nick Fuentes, not like a lot of the situation that's been unfolding the last couple of months, such as the Iran bombing, the massive support for Israel, the intervention against Venezuela that we're ramping up towards, all that. And a lot of other situations, they're like, we just wanted America first. We want to develop and look inward and kind of, turn our gaze away and refocus our materials and resources and energy back into rebuilding, reindustrializing the American home front. And, it seems like you're kind of getting that a little bit, and you're kind of getting this, and Trump's attention is kind of all over the place. He's older now and everything. But he also doesn't seem to be as potent and quite as powerful as he was in his first term. Granted, he's older, but that situation has just been unfolding so much, and people just aren't happy that, you're saying you're the president with no new wars, right? You campaigned on that, you're going to end the Ukraine and Gaza war on day one, We already all knew that for the most part that wasn't going to happen, but he said it, and we all thought, he's not going to do that. That's really not possible. But hey, he could probably do it later down the line. He already has a situation. Instead, he just was going to be buddies with Russia and thinking he could end it. And honestly, that was pretty naive. At least he tried, I guess. But don't criticize Biden for saying he can't do that, and then you try to do that, and then it just fails utterly. So, but he hasn't had any real resolution on that. Just all been tick for tack diplomacy and stuff going on back and forth. But now you campaigned on no new wars, and you're gonna have a new war in Venezuela, which you say all the drug cartels and all that fentanyl's coming from. Yeah, it's part of it, but as with most government activities around the world, such as including the CIA, there's a lot more, way more subterfuge, way more real things that are going on. There's a real reason for everything. There's just the outer surface that they're just scratching. Most of the drugs and fentanyl, cartels operate in Mexico or Colombia or other Central American countries, not really Venezuela. But the thing is, Venezuela's more at the center of a proxy war right now because they're allies, or they're really close with Russia and China. And, this is almost Cold War style. We're trying to extricate Venezuela from them and bring it back into the Western American fold. And they have a lot of oil as well. So we're trying to do that, and there's all the Aragua stuff. But, if you're going to take over a country, and you're saying a lot of people are coming from that country, they're just going to flood here.